Hey, you're listening to the Riverdale podcast. This is episode number 89. My name is Jonathan. Welcome to lovely Riverdale, USA. This is a weekly Archie Comics fan podcast. We update every Saturday morning, and every week we break things down into four categories. The first category is the book of the week. That's the comic book I read this week. Sometimes it's a new comic book, sometimes it's an old comic book, but it's always an Archie comic book, and boy, is it a doozy this week. Next up, we go to news. That's what happened in the world of Archie in the week since our last podcast. We jump then to new releases. That's what came out this past Wednesday. What will be coming up this coming Wednesday from Archie Comics. And we're going to wrap up today with a couple of listener emails, a couple of suggestions from the audience. We're going to get to that. That sounds good. It's going to be a weird, fun, cool show. I'm excited about it. Stick around. Let's get on to the book of the week. All right, this week we've got a real oddity from the past of Archie Comics. This week's book of the week is Mantech Robot Warriors number 2. This was a complete mystery to me. I found this back at the Granite State Con back in late September, early October, late September. Doesn't actually matter. I found this in a 50-cent bin or a 25-cent bin. Again, that doesn't matter either. The fact of the matter is, I found this book, Mantech Robot Warriors number 2. It was published in late 1984, and it carries that now classic Archie Adventure Series banner across the top, that red banner. And because I'll buy just about any Archie comic for 50 cents, and I particularly am looking for anything I've never seen before, anything odd like this, I picked this up, brought it home, it sat in a stack, and then this week, looking for a book to talk about, why not Mantech Robot Warriors? The cover is one of the great classic covers that I didn't even feel like they did anymore back in the 80s, where it gives you sort of a plot synopsis of what's coming up in the issue. You have a lot of word balloons on the cover. You have a lot of action going on. And there's something really classic and cool about that. A little corny, a little goofy. They're showing you a scene that happens later in the book, but definitely condensed and smushed down. And it used to be that's what comic covers was a sort of a preview of what was going to come up in the issue, or a fake out. Sometimes they'd be like, can you believe that this is going to happen? And then it does happen in the issue, but in a different way than you'd expect. And I guess that's a little bit of the case here. But when we get into the first page, we find that the story is by Rich Margopoulos. And we've talked about Rich Margopoulos in prior episodes. He wrote for the Riverdale kids. He wrote for the main Archie books. But he also wrote a great deal for the Mighty Crusaders and the other stuff in this line, this 1980s Archie Adventure Series line. The art on this is by Dick Ayers and Chick Stone. I assume Dick Ayers penciled and Chick Stone inked, but it could have been some combination of the two. Those are both classic dudes. Look them up if you don't know their work. I'm not overly familiar with their work, but as soon as I saw their names, I was like, these guys are heavy hitters. These are big dudes. Chick Stone used to ink Fantastic Four back in the day. These are classic comics illustrators. And those credits are up in the upper left-hand corner, and then down in the lower right-hand corner, sort of where you wouldn't notice them, we find lettering by Bill Yoshida and coloring by Barry Grossman. And they need no introduction. Those guys did a lot of great art and production for Archie Comics for decades. Now, to get into the guts of this book, it's weird. They give you a lot of character introductions. They give you a lot of melodrama. There's a lot of word balloons, a lot of captions telling you what's going on. It reads like a real old Silver Age, Bronze Age comic book. But the premise of the book is that you have two warring factions. You have Tyrannic, who's the main villain, and his minions, Negatech, Doomtech, and Terrortech. And then you have, of course, our heroes, the Mantech robots, led by Jackson Good, and his buddies, his minions of the sort, Lasertech, Aquatech, and Solartech. And the premise of the book is that Jackson Good found these astronauts in some sort of state of space sleep and saved them from the clutches of death by putting them in robot bodies. And now they fight the evil forces of Tyrannic. It is most definitely a concept born out of 80s pop culture, born out of 80s toy line pop culture. As I was reading this, I mean, the moment I got it, I looked into the indicia under the first page to find out who owned this property and where this property came from. And I was very much expecting to see copyright Toy Company X, Toy Company Y. And I didn't see that, which I thought was really odd. So I read through it, and it really does feel like Sectars or Centurions or Mask or any of those 80s toy line properties. It reads very much like that. You have the two different factions who are warring. Very much the vehicle designs and the costume designs, they look like action figures. They have very set, intricate costumes. And it very much feels like a lot of the other toy-related books. I have a lot of those old 80s Star comics from Marvel and things like that. ROM Space Knight, it's not unlike that. Of course, you had the Transformers comic book and the G.I. Joe comic book that were both based on toy lines that were doing amazing numbers, were huge successes in this era. So it's no surprise that they would make a comic book based on a toy line or based on the concept of a toy line. So it wasn't until I read through this entire issue that I went to the letters page and found out that this property was actually owned by Remco. Remco was a toy company that was gone by the late 80s, but they did a lot of cool stuff. Most notably, to me, as I read this, was the Mighty Crusaders toy line. I have one of those. I have the S.H.I.E.L.D. action figure from that line. They're a cool series of clunky, old-style action figures based on the S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Fox and the Fly and all of those Mighty Crusaders characters. So it does make a lot of sense that they would want to work with Archie further to promote this line of toys that they put together called Mantech. Now, I don't even know if we need to get into what happens in the book, but the basic premise is that the Mantech's leader, Jackson Good, has crash-landed a plane, a jet, a spaceship, a spacecraft of some kind on this alien planet, and the Mantech folks, the robots, cyborgs, whatever they are, go to rescue him and are fallen. They're sort of susceptible to these flowers that make them delusional, and they imagine themselves as they would like to be, which is back on Earth in their human bodies with their friends and family. And Jackson has to go and find them and put their air-filtering helmets on and bring them back from whence they came, sort of drag them back to reality. A pretty simple concept, but effective nonetheless. In the back part of the book, we get a little bit of history about the planet that they're on now and the foes that they're dealing with now. So it seems like they're setting up a lot here. I don't think this series ran for more than 4 or 5 issues, but I will be interested in tracking them down. I'm also very interested in the toy line now. I went and looked that up. That looks ridiculous. So, more than just an entertaining comic book with some great Bronze Age art and some clunky, fun Bronze Age writing, it's a little bit of a history lesson on not only the history of Archie comics, but the history of toys and these sort of synergistic things, these in the 80s, every toy line had to have a comic book, had to have a cartoon, had to have these sorts of things. And there's a lot of that stuff that's D-list, C-list stuff that doesn't get remembered as fondly. So it's interesting to be introduced to something like this that existed in my lifetime but was completely off of my radar. But there it is, a strange anomaly in the history of Archie comics. Mantech Robot Warriors #2. That is the book of the week. All right, a light news week in the world of Archie comics, but there are a couple of signings coming up next week in association with the release of Afterlife with Archie #2 that's coming this Wednesday, the 20th. And on that same day, the 20th, over at Golden Apple Comics in Los Angeles, Roberto Aguirre Sacasa is going to be there signing. That sounds like a good time. And across the country, on Saturday the 23rd at Dr. No's Comics in Georgia, Francesco Francavilla is going to be there signing. So if you're able to traverse the country in just a few days, you can go ahead and get the entire creative team to sign your copy of Afterlife with Archie. But that's all the news for this week. Head over to RiverdalePodcast.com. We've got links to more information about those signings. All right, new releases. New releases for this past Wednesday, November the 13th. We get a couple of trade paperbacks this week. The Archie Comics 1,000-page Comics Jamboree. It's a $14.99 1,000-page trade paperback. We've talked about these. This is the third in the series. I looked at it at the shop. It is an intense and overwhelming tome. I don't know what to do with it, but maybe you do. Maybe you want to read 1,000 pages of Archie comics in one sitting. This is certainly the best way to do that. It does make an impression, that's for sure. Also, this week, Worlds Collide Volume 1. This is the Sonic Mega Man crossover that ran last spring into last summer. For $11.99, you get the first volume of that. It's going to be 3 volumes, each collecting 4 issues of that. And for $11.99, great price. I mean, that's the same price you would have paid for the issues, the same price I did pay for the issues off the stands. And in the back, you've got some back matter. You've got the variant covers. There were a ton of variant covers for this. You got all the Dr. Robotnik, Dr. Eggman, Best Friends crossovers, or variant covers. Those are super fun and super funny. People had a really good time drawing those, I can tell. And those are the releases for this past Wednesday. Coming up this coming Wednesday, the 20th, a big, big week. As I said before, Afterlife with Archie #2 for $2.99 coming out next week. Also, Archie and Friends Double Digest number 33. That's a $5.99 double digest. I had to make sure I got the right number of doubles in there. It's a giant 300-plus page collection. It's got a great Fernando Ruiz Santa Christmas-themed cover. Totally rad. That's coming next week, $5.99. Jughead's Double Digest number 197 next week for $3.99. That has the Christmas-themed Jughead cover that was going to be on the final issue of Jughead that was never released, never was solicited, but never formally came out. So it's cool to see that cover used. It's a really fun cover. I think you're going to like it. Finally, next week, we're going to get Mega Man number 31 for $2.99. Over in the digital store, digital.archiecomics.com, the Archie Comics app, over in Comixology, wherever you get your digital comics. Looks like we got a new digital exclusive this week. I certainly hadn't seen it before. They make it a little more difficult now to tell what's new and what's old over on the digital side of Archie. But Little Archie and Friends seems to be the new digital exclusive for this week. 150-plus pages, $4.99. This is classic old-school Bob Bowling stuff. This stuff is crazy. It is off the wall. They really let Bob Bowling go wild and create some amazing stories back then. He was given a lot of creative control and sent them out into space, had them fighting the Mad Doctor Doom, had them doing spectacular stuff that you wouldn't see in the regular teenage adventures of Archie. And this is lots of stuff that's been folded into stories in the last few years, certainly the stuff that Tom DeFalco and Fernando Ruiz worked on a few years back, 4 or 5 years back. So lots of good stuff there, classic stuff. Can't go wrong with Bob Bowling, Little Archie and Friends, digital exclusive. So those are your new releases for this past Wednesday, the 13th, this coming Wednesday, the 20th, and your digital releases of the week from Archie Comics. Finally this week, wanted to go over a couple of listener comments. Love to get listener feedback. You can send me an email at riverdalepodcast@yahoo.com. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter, Riverdale Podcast, or at Riverdale Pod. Also, you can find me over on the Archie Fan Forum at archiefans.com. This week, I got a note from Jeremy Lamastus, who's a listener of the show, posts a lot on the comments over on Facebook. Really appreciate that, Jeremy. And shadeofjeremy.deviantart.com is his site, and he has a whole gallery of drawings of various Riverdale characters, Sabrina and Shrill of the New Kids storyline from a few years ago, the long-forgotten Shrill. I was excited to see that, but I have a link there at riverdalepodcast.com to his DeviantArt site. You can go check out his drawings of Riverdale Archie characters and beyond. So thanks for passing that along. Also over on the Archie boards, user Betty Reggie issued sort of a challenge to me last week. Mentioned that I should try to review all of the books coming out next week on the 20th. It seems like in the last month or two, Archie has tended to dump a lot of books on a single week in a month. And that's a little overwhelming. I do try to stay current, and when I can't stay current, to go way back and look at old issues. But I thought this was an interesting challenge, and I think with all of your permission, I'm going to go ahead and try to do an extra-length episode next week and actually try to read all 4 of those books for next week, 2 of which are gigantic double digests, and review them all for the show. So I appreciate you throwing down that challenge, Betty Reggie. I would suggest that anybody, if there's stuff you want to see on the show, to go ahead and send me a message, get in touch, and let me know. But next week, I'm going to do it. Next week, I will be reading Afterlife with Archie number 2, Archie and Friends Double Digest number 33, Jughead Double Digest number 197, and Mega Man number 31. I'm going to cover all of those. I may involve some sort of timer, so I can't talk too long about each. But I think that's going to be fun. I think that it's an interesting challenge. And if this does keep happening, if we do keep getting like a number of Archie books on a single week, this could be something that becomes a regular feature on the show. But we'll see what happens. So next week we'll be breaking format a little bit for the first time ever. I'm not sure to what extent yet. But you'll have to wait and see. And I will have to wait and see as well. But thank you, Jeremy. And thanks, Betty Reggie, over on the forums. Head over to Jeremy's DeviantArt site. Check out his art. And thanks again to Betty Reggie. And we'll see how that experiment goes next week. There are a lot of great ways to help out the show if you are inclined to do so. You can listen to the show every week. That's a great help. It brings our numbers up. It does good stuff. You can write me an email or get in touch like the folks in the last segment did and be a part of the show. That's super helpful. You can write an iTunes review. Head over to iTunes and write a review for the show. That helps more people find it. And if you want to help out the show financially, you can head over to riverdalepodcast.com and click that link for TIFA, Things from Another World. It's a giant online comic shop. And after clicking that link at riverdalepodcast.com, anything you purchase on Things from Another World, a percentage of what you spend goes to support the show. That's rad. And they have just started a big event. They have throw a big sale in November leading up to Black Friday and Cyber Monday and all of that stuff. But this year, it is the progressive sale, and it started just yesterday on the 15th. There's a huge selection of graphic novels and single issues and great stuff that is currently 40 to 60% off. Starting a week later on the 22nd, all of that stuff will be discounted further from 50% to 70% off. On the 29th, the following week, all of that stuff will be discounted between 60% and 80% off. And this all leads up to their huge sales that are coming up for Cyber Monday on December the 2nd. So there's lots of great stuff on sale right now over at thingsfromanotherworld.com. And if you could do me the favor of going to RiverdalePodcast.com and clicking that link to get there, anything you purchase there will support the show. So thanks for considering that. On the way out today, I want to remind everyone to head over to RiverdalePodcast.com. There you're going to find the cover of this week's Book of the Week, Mantech Robot Warriors #2. And this is a thrill, guys. You're really gonna want to see this. It's beautiful old school art and lots of word balloons and lots of melodrama. It's exceptional. While you're there, you're going to find links to subscribe to the show on iTunes. You're going to find links to send us an email at RiverdalePodcast.com. Like the show on Facebook, Facebook.com/RiverdalePodcast. Follow us on Twitter, RiverdalePod. You'll also find links there, like as I said, to our sponsors. You can leave comments there on these specific episodes or posts. Lots going on there. Appreciate you checking that out. Also, Riverdale Podcast is part of First Comics News, so you can head over to firstcomicsnews.com. Our new episodes are posted there on Mondays. You'll also find tons of other podcasts and breaking news, cool stuff going on in the world of comics. I guess that's going to do it for this week. Thank you guys so much for listening. Look forward to next week. It's going to be a longer, fuller, more exciting show. Again, thank you guys for listening. My name is Jonathan, and I'll see you again next week here in lovely Riverdale, USA.